Bedrock Valley Beats, King of Rock. Okay, it's time to talk pirate radio. And now it's the Dream Team's Timmi Magic that we'll hand you over to in a second. Tonight we're going to be investigating the phenomena that is pirate radio, talking to the DJs who learned their trade through this illegal broadcasting. That includes various Radio 1 luminaries, as you find out. Tim Westwood, DJ Spoonie, Trevor Nelson. We'll also hear from producers, musicians and others whose pioneering music from punk, reggae, house, jungle and garage was all first heard on pirate radio. And of course we have to talk to the lawmakers on one side and the lawbreakers on the other. But if you have ever wondered how or why people risk their lives sticking aerials on top of a tower block, listen on.
I'm all for pirates has opened doors for everything, you know. Most of the Radio 1 specialists have all come from pirate one way or another, you know what I mean? It's like a stepping stone.
Radio programmes don't need expensive studios and a big transmitter and a huge aerial. You can basically do it yourself.
It's a war out there, even getting on tower blocks. You've got certain caretakers getting involved and ripping your aerials down. It's going mad, and I do believe soon it's just going to crash.
The last caller ring back with Timmi Magic on 97 to 99 FM, Radio 1.
Up to the boy races in the Bethnal Green region locked in. One time.
We're driving around Leighton in East London, listening to the pirate stations as you do. And we're just approaching the same tower block in the estate where we used to transmit many, many years ago. In fact, there used to be up to 4 pirate radio stations in one tower block at one time. But one thing I can remember about pirate radio, our station manager, he always used to say, never come into the tower block with your record box. Be discreet or the DTI is going to get you. So what you had to do, you had to park about half a mile away and put all your records into a black plastic bag or a bin liner or something. Then you used to go into the tower block and you could be faced with a fella DJ. What do? Do you smile, tell him where you're going, or do you pretend like neither of you are going to pirate radio, you're going around your friend's house, but you're both carrying black plastic bags? Next thing is getting to your floor. The person in the lift says, what floor do you want? So you know you're going to number 15, but you play smart. 19, please. So what you do is you go to the 19th floor and you walk down. Some stations weren't as discreet. You could go onto their floor and hear the sounds just pumping out, and you think, God blimey, there's an all-night party going on. But no, it was the discreet sounds of a pirate radio. You then go to the door, knock on it, and you probably see the curtains just move ever so slightly, discreetly, just to make sure they knew who was coming in.
Let him in.
Then the door would open and they'd let you in.
Come in, sir. Thank you for coming. Come in.
But the next thing is to sit down, set your tunes up, and ready to go out on air.
Is that a timetable? Well, get on it. It's your time.
For many, though, the 60s was the original era of renegade radio pirates. With the BBC finding it difficult to reflect the growing rock and pop scene, broadcasters took to the high seas, thus coining the term pirates, to provide the UK with its musical diet. Radio 1 DJ John Peel remembers.
I did actually work for about 5 months on the pirate radio ship Radio London, anchored off Felixstowe. And you got paid, I remember, through something like the Cayman Islands or somewhere like that, some kind of tax haven, and it all seemed slightly dodgy. And the radio station was run, as far as I remember, by kind of multimillionaires in Midland, Texas. But nevertheless, I was desperate for work, and also it gave me an opportunity to get onto the radio in this country, which is what I really wanted to do.
All right now, for all you boppers out there in the big city, all you street people with an ear for the action, here's a hit with them in mind.
I would come on at different times of the day and just play what was ever on the charts and the records that I was required to play. I was allowed to have a hit pick, which was picked for me by somebody in the office, and often turned out to be a record that I'd never heard in my life before, but it would go out as John Peel's hit pick for whatever the week was. Recreationally, there wasn't a great deal to offer, I have to say, and there were a couple of the engineers and myself who used to climb to the very highest deck on the ship, which was called something like the poop deck, I shouldn't be surprised, and sit up there and smoke dope and giggle.
What's so funny?
That was pretty nice. I rather enjoyed that, but found it was not a good idea to do radio programmes after you'd been doing that, because there were an awful lot of records ending, then it kind of... That's just beautiful, you know. It's just the Doors, man. Anyway, that was about the only recreation open to us, apart from playing cards and watching porn.
By 1967, the government had outlawed the offshore pirates and, supposedly coincidentally, the BBC introduced Radio 1. This was the end of DJs in boats in the UK. Pirates continued, though, with stations like Radio Jackie and Kaleidoscope flying the flag. It wasn't until the 1980s that the modern phenomenon of inner-city pirates was truly in evidence, as Richard Barbrook from the Hypermedia Research Centre at the University of Westminster explains.
The reason why pirate radio became possible in the 80s is that you could build transmitters for less than the cost of an advert on capital radio. And so effectively they were disposable. If you could do a gig or have an event or get a little bit of advertising, you could cover the cost of your transmitters. And particularly using some sophisticated linking technology, you could have a studio in one place and your transmitter in another. And it was actually quite difficult to find the studio. So this meant that when the Home Office investigators came to take your transmitter away, they wouldn't take away your record collection, which was probably much more valuable, well, inevitably more valuable than the transmitter.
Trevor Nelson.
In the early 80s, pirate radio for my music emerged via stations like JFM, TKO, Solar, LWR, of course Kiss FM.
Reggae DJ Nick Manassa.
I was aware of the first wave of pirate radio when I was quite a lot younger, which was stations like LWR and one which Gordon Mack, the guy who went on to found Kiss, was part of, called JFM. It was really those two that were the first two big ones that I was aware of. I think Tim Westwood used to do a show on LWR, I seem to remember, and people like CJ Carlos, and that was very soul-orientated. There was a little bit of reggae, but it was basically a soul thing, sort of back in the days when there was soul and reggae, and that was it.
The new soul and reggae pirates like Solar, JFM, LWR and the Dread Broadcasting Corporation paved the way for perhaps the most successful pirate of them all, Kiss FM. Kiss's founder Gordon Mack.
We started because stations like JFM and Solar and some of these people that have been around for years, they all went off back in 85, and it meant that the airwaves were pretty clean. There was still, you know, there's a few stations still on. There was LWR and there was Fame and a couple others. There's two commercial stations in the BBC, so you had type of probably about 6 hours of dance music on legal radio a week, maybe type of 8 hours at a push. The first broadcast of Kiss FM was way back in 85. We broadcast from a squat in Charlton. I went on and done the first show. I can't remember what the record was now. I think it might have been Roberto Gilliam, All About My Baby or something like that. We were coming on then 7 days a week. It is difficult to keep on 7 days in those days because there's a whole lot of pirates that have gone off. The radio investigation squad came out and type of just obliterated us over that Christmas. And we type of licked our wounds and come back on in the January or February because we was hit every day. I mean, it was just like, pyong, pyong, they're up again, let's get them. Pyong.
Trevor Nelson.
Everybody involved knew it was illegal. That was the law as well, because, I mean, when you're doing illegal house parties, illegal warehouse parties, I mean, doing illegal radio was just part of that whole scene. It made it more exciting. We knew it was illegal. I mean, we got scared when the DTI started threatening.
Now just behave yourself, and nobody will get hurt.
You know, to do certain things if you got caught, like confiscate your records, slap you with a big fine. I mean, it scared the hell out of all of us, to be honest. But, I mean, I would turn up for my show in the middle of Camden Market, you know, and then people were going, all right, Trev, you know, how you doing, mate? Yeah, see you at the club tonight, and things like that. And they knew I was supposed to be on the radio in 5 minutes, so the studio had to be closed, you know. But we never had anyone ever, I mean, touch wood, we were just unbelievably well looked after by the public.
Okay, let's get down to it then. Stay tuned, boppers.
With such a high profile, it was inevitable that Kiss and other pirates would attract the attention of the Department of Trade and Industry, better known as the DTI. Barry Maxwell of the Radiocommunications Agency.
The agency is comprised of radio engineers who are looking for radio signals that shouldn't be there, and our methods are to try and detect those signals.
You'd make a good cop.
It's fairly easy to find transmitters and antennas, and when our staff do that, then it's a matter of removing the source of interference. Well, the law relating to pirate radio is really quite simple. You need a licence to operate a broadcasting radio station in this country, and what pirates do is simply set up on any frequency without any sort of licence whatsoever.
Behave yourselves. Keep clear of troublemakers.
If an operator goes to a Crown Court, then that can be an unlimited fine or 2 years imprisonment. Or in the Magistrates Court, which is more usually where they go to, it's 6 months imprisonment or a £5,000 fine.
You're good. You're awful good.
Pirates have responded to the pressure of the law by keeping their studio locations secret and their equipment as cheap as possible. What's the point in spending hundreds of pounds on a studio setup only to have it confiscated? Drum and bass pioneer, DJ Hype.
You'd get an empty flat, or at one point it was upstairs a pub. It's just like, basically, what do you need? A room with 2 decks, a mixer, a mic, a pager or a mobile phone, and that's it. And you've got a box in the studio and a box and an aerial on a roof somewhere. You know, like you've got your transmitter and your receiver. It's very simple. It's shantytown, but it's real.
Once this was a typical high-rise council flat in Hackney. Now it's a pirate's fortress protected by 3 tons of concrete. Barbed wire fortifications sit incongruously on the roof of the block, the radio flat just below. Extraordinarily, the fence isn't there to keep the police and illegal radio inspectors out. It's the way the pirates get in. They abseil in. Hanging perilously from a rope, the youngsters behind this craze swing their way into the top window.
Trevor Nelson.
Basically, it was quite simple. It's very crude. The station was once in my own flat, so I know exactly how it was set up. I mean, for example, when it was set up in my flat, it was like we'd have 2 Technics turntables, a mixer, like a normal DJ setup, a couple of tape decks, which we used to run adverts from. You know, we had the pause button on. We'd lift the pause button off and run an ad. It was really crude. Our jingles were played the same way. Press play, whack the fader up, and you'd have a jingle. And then we'd have an aerial on the roof. I was 19 floors up, so we had mad engineers who'd go up there and rig it up. But then we had what we called a microwave link, which was the key thing in pirate radio. You had to have a microwave link because it was your way of not being detected back to your studio. So basically, imagine you've got an aerial on my block of flats in Leytonstone, beaming over to Crystal Palace or somewhere like that. So when the DTI came to raid us, they'd go to Crystal Palace and we wouldn't be there.